Welcome to the Popcorn Talk Network, for the online broadcast network that features movie discussion, news, and interviews. Press 1. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies.
I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Why, hello, everybody. Hello, movie fans. This is Anatomy of a Movie. Hello, my name is Demetri Panos, one of your hosts of a host of hosts. And today, on the slab, oh, you shouldn't say that about a guy who's already deceased, huh? Oh, sorry about
really
that.
Can't say
Well,
that. Oh, I'm glad you caught that before.
well, it's Halloween. What the hell? So today on the slab we have Steve Jobs the movie. Danny Boyle's, I think, great directorial feature about the man, the myth, the legend, Steve Jobs. And why don't we, before we start getting into dissection, I want to introduce you to my fine panel of hosts. Starting from the far left, we got Zach.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us today.
And Marisa Serafini.
Hello.
My partner in crime, as she tweeted
Partners in
that.
crime. Hello, everybody.
And to Sarah, the
Hello.
electric little outage, Sara Stretton. How are you? She
You
just has
have
the
to place
powers.
the blame.
She's
you
a
have
super
to
heroine.
place the blame. Any technical difficulties? My fault.
And I'm
sorry in advance.
So, well, like I said, we are talking about Steve Jobs, the movie, and well, why don't we just open it up? What are your initial thoughts? We're gonna go ladies first. I'll start with you, Sarah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll go first. So, after seeing this movie, I felt like it really had a lot of its parts in line, excellent. I think this is a very well-made movie. The team that brought together this picture, I think everyone really excelled in their department, and I think it came together well in a cohesive manner. The tone was very fluid, the imagery, like everything just it felt like a well-packaged Apple product. Like it was just like so clean and nice. I can say that I really loved this movie. My only, and it's not even a problem because I think it fits the nature of the story. I've read about Steve Jobs and his character, and most him and the people he was around aren't my typical friend group. I don't really have a lot of, I can't really relate to a lot of their motivations or their choices. So it's a very much, I love to observe them. I felt like it was realistic about the habitat they have, but it was never really pulling at my heartstrings because there's no one's shoes that I could really step into and relate or empathize with. But I thought it was a really great depiction put in film.
Question, and correct me if I'm wrong, we were all talking amongst ourselves about this movie, and did I overhear, you read the book, the biography in which this movie was somewhat based
the
on?
Walter Isaacson.
I read the biography, which was used for a lot of the instances in the script. It's really pulled from that book. I read it 2 years ago. I also had the privilege of seeing Steve Jobs with a Q&A with the director, with Kate Winslet, with a couple other people were there. Fassbender was not there, so got to hear from them. Sorkin was there, so that was great. Some insight. So, it looked up, and I think that they were really passionate about this project, and I'm excited to talk about it more.
Cool. Marisa.
I enjoyed this film, and we had the other Steve Jobs film that came out fairly recently, a couple of years ago. And
Ashton Kutcher, right?
Yeah, Ashton Kutcher's Jobs film, and I liked how this one was completely different in a way from that, because when we think Steve Jobs, we think of the man, but we also, in film perspective, we're still thinking of the more recent film. And I liked how this purposely went into, when they went into production, they're like, let's be completely different from the other one and have a different format. I like how they executed that. And I liked pinpointing certain aspects in Steve Jobs' life that a lot of people on the surface know what happened, but we don't really know all the details on what actually went into why it caused tension between him and Steve Jobs and his coworkers or family members. And I really like how they dramatized it in a way for people just to understand him, because we know on the surface level that at face value he was difficult to work with, but now seeing like his thought process and how he went about and executing things and the reasoning behind his actions made me understand him just even more, and as a human being, as a businessman, and as a family member.
Interesting.
Yeah, what stood out for me about this movie is sort of what Sarah was saying, is just everything was clicking. There is no bad part of this movie at all. And I think the more I've thought about it, the more it really comes down to this is a fine piece of art. More than like a movie that just tells the story, a biopic of Steve Jobs. That would have been the easy way to go. You could have just done like, what was his upbringing like? We do the college years, him working like hard in the garage with Woz, and then jump forward and fall out with Apple. It did this unique take on it, this unique way of telling it just at the launch events, which is what we know him for. We know him for these big launch events that everyone's tuning in for. Everyone's tuning into Twitter. I remember in college I was like turning on notifications so that I could follow tweets about the events when I couldn't watch them. And I'm not even an Apple fanboy. I just wanted to know what was coming out. And that drove this style so much that this is a 2-hour piece of art, as opposed to just a simple story. And that's the highlight of it for me. Is the work of Sorkin and Boyle together made this something that is interesting to watch, not just a movie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I agree. I think that, well, for me, the framework of how this movie worked within the launch points. Going in, it's like, they had all this information that they're throwing at us, and it could have played like a typical biopic, and it didn't play that way. I liked how they chose the launch events, because, as you said, this is what everybody knows of Apple. They know of the launch events, and even if at a cursory, even if you know a little bit, you know of the Ridley Scott Super Bowl ad that ran. And how big a deal like that changed commercials for everybody, and so picking these times and picking these launch points to have this dialogue. Number one, for me anyways, it did a couple of things. It didn't stretch it out to be this drama. So all this dialogue was taking place, and I gotta figure there couldn't have been that much drama going on 20 minutes before showtime or 40 minutes before showtime, but it was cleverly done because it gave you all this information, and it helped with the pacing. And as Danny Boyle says, like, the less you depict, the more you tell. And I got more from this story just by these 3 segments, like a 3-act play, so to speak, because there was so much dialogue and the pacing. Like, I never got bored of looking/watching this movie and listening, because the dialogue was the Aaron Sorkin rapid machine gun kind of fire that we're used to in Social Network. And it's weird because Danny Boyle sort of kind of says that this is like almost like the second part of maybe a trilogy of films. It sort of reminded me of Social Network, and in cases it actually sort of reminded me of David Fincher, who I know was originally opted. He was going to direct this, but then he ended up opting out, and there were parts of it that reminded me of David Fincher while I was watching this. But I loved how the 3 segments cohesively fit together, yet they were each filmed very differently, and yet they told a linear story, and they did it in a great time frame that didn't stretch things out. And the performances I thought were great. Fassbender, this guy doesn't look like Steve Jobs, but I didn't care. I was so engaged by watching him on screen. Same thing with Kate, oh my God, Kate Winslet, I thought was fantastic.
She
as
disappeared. She more than any other actor, she disappeared into that role. I forgot that it was Kate Winslet, and maybe it's just like the hair and like the crazy '80s size glasses.
But she looked great in the role too.
Yeah.
And so I love those performances, and we'll even talk about Seth Rogen trying to pull a Jonah Hill, which I think he had some success. I mean, it's a good choice for him, but I thought performance-wise, this movie was great. Even the gentleman that you were trying to figure out at the graphic who's played Scully, which the guy from Speed and Dumb and Dumber, Jeff Daniels.
We keep wanting to call him Jeff Bridges, so if that happens, we're sorry. It came out, and it's one of those names that now is stuck in our head. We're like, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Gosh, don't say
Jeff
that
Daniels,
on air.
who was in the
He was in The
newsroom with
Martian.
and Aaron Sorkin.
and
he worked with Aaron Sorkin.
And he's been having a good year too. I mean, he's in the Martian, that's currently huge. He's in this movie, and he turns out, I think, a stellar performance. For me, it was hard not to be engaged in this movie. So I really like this movie a lot. Loved it.
I think, wow, we're all on the same page. I'm sure we're gonna get. That means we're probably gonna get pretty nitpicky, because we all can say that we thoroughly enjoyed this film and have some level of respect for it. But so.
Well,
we're here to really look at the details.
Why don't we talk about, there were 3 filming styles incorporated into this movie. And it was very much it reminded me a little bit of Grand Budapest Hotel, how that was filmed in different, using different film stock, even different frames. This movie, in its 3 acts, they did something that he filmed in 16 millimeter. And the first act was in 16
They filmed according to the time, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So each segment, each of the 3 launches, was filmed in accordance with what was used during that time.
But 35 millimeter was being used to make movies at that time. It's just interesting that he picked 16 millimeter because he felt that it had a different look. And appearance-wise, whatever the grain is, it looked. He wanted
homemade.
it to look 80s.
Yeah. Well, I guess short of going and getting an 80s stock, like finding some old 80s stock, which wouldn't look the same, wouldn't look really, it still wouldn't look good to a general audience, but the 60 millimeter gave it a different feel from 35.
Agreed.
In a way that, if you just had this, it looks like it's shot in the 80s.
It looks like it's shot in a garage.
Exactly.
Where Mac all started, where Steve Jobs started.
That coupled with the soundtrack, even the music changed throughout
Everything,
the entire
and then
movie.
the transitions that brought those acts, so to speak, together, I thought were amazing and so different. Yes, the backbone of this is brilliantly done. The way that Sorkin uses parallels, it's all the same thing. So we can parallel, which is very easy to see what relationships have changed, what people have changed. Also, he self-prescribes, he loves ticking clocks. So every single section, there is a ticking clock that he has to be on stage. That creates a brilliant pace that you're never. His writing obviously is always going pace. The way it's shot, you'll notice. I noticed most of the characters are, when they're having a very intense conversation that some people could just have by standing face to face and having eye-to-eye locking moments. Oftentimes in this, they're walking. They're moving to the next place. You're in a crowded hallway. You're one step in front of the other person. You're organizing something on a desk. Papers are falling. There is a movement. There's a fast-paced movement going along with these fast-paced words.
Absolutely.
So there's not... And then that makes the moments of standstill really pop.
And I think what was genius about Sorkin's script and doing it this way, and actually even filming it this way, is because between each launch, it was many years. So each launch had to sort of kind of bring the audience up to speed very quickly without hitting you over the head that you're getting thrown a ton of exposition. So that was used by film stock, by music, by costumes, and then by a little bit of, then dialogue would come in. And I thought that was genius because I'm going, well, what the hell? Well, we just skipped 10 years, and then as the movie goes, okay, I figure out what's going on. And I thought that was genius. I really, really did. So, Marisa?
I agree that the whole skipping, using photography in between each launch, because we, as the audience, Steve Jobs has been integral in all of our lives, and even if you haven't met him, he's been a part of your life, whether it be music, computers, how we communicate in the world. He's been a part of that, and he's always been with us. So we know his life. We know the failures and struggles he went through, the launch failures in the Mac and all this, Macintosh and whatnot. And so I liked the fact that they didn't stress out his failures. Every point we focus with Steve Jobs is his idea of what could be the next successful thing, not the next failure. And that's what I enjoyed, because if you're going to go back to the Ashton Kutcher film, they really dramatize that. And they go heavy into everyone fired him, and now he has bitterness and all this tension with his coworkers and people he worked with. And I liked how they didn't focus on that in this film.
I think that also applies to how this movie seems to trust its audience. Mm-hmm. It maintains the fact that if you are going to mentally be able to keep up with it without it force feeding you information. It is about product launches, but in my opinion, we're not getting the point A, B, and C of what the product is, how it's made, what it's going to do. It trusts that you know the impact. It trusts that you know what this stage of computer might have had. It doesn't really, you don't get like, oh, I can describe to you every product at every launch. That's not as important. They really introduce the characters. And they don't also force feed you everyone's resume that he's talking to. You don't need to know everyone's full background, what their qualifications are. It trusts in the audience that we're going to be able to project the brilliance on his coworkers. We're going to be able to project that everyone there is overqualified for the way that they're being treated. Like, they're being yelled at and told they're basically numbskulls, but at no point was I ever like, oh, maybe that person really is a numbskull. Like, maybe this person really deserves to be yelled at. You don't get the, oh, you're so brilliant on the side. Really look at what all this person has done. Yeah. It just trusts that we're going to see Steve Jobs out of his perspective. We don't need to fill in all the blanks. The audience will be able and creative enough to do that themselves.
And it was smart, too, that it was a product launch. Like, it wasn't like an Apple product launch today, which, hey, we've got the new iPhone, but then we got the iPad, and then, oh, we got this cool pen that's $100. No, this was focusing on the Mac. This was focusing on the Next and the iMac that had come out. And they focused on each one. And I did like how, because I do remember the launches for each one, and I remember how spectacularly the Next failed. Like, I remember people coming out saying, who the hell is going to pay this much money for a computer? And I remember Macs coming out and hearing word about that it was a powerful machine, but it was expensive for the time to even try to get. And the closed network was a big deal. But I love that it showcased those failures, because his success with the iMac is so spectacular. You couldn't get away from those colorful see-through computers. Yeah. And it was it changed computing like forever. Like, nobody else could catch up. Like, he did something after those spectacular failures. He did something that was so spectacularly successful that it changed the way people compute. And it was just like that. It's almost like an underdog story, because he failed, and then he comes back and he does this one grand thing that just changed everything.
And that's what I liked with this film too. On top of all the technology, we saw him as a person, and in a character we know he is, a real life person, but just a character standpoint from a filmmaking aspect, we saw him arch, because the first launch was all about a product. Right. The second launch was the product and a family situation. And then the third launch, I felt like it was mostly just about his daughter, and which was more of a family. So it was like technology and family, and then family. So we saw just an evolution of his character in general.
What was that idea that, like, that was how his life was a failure when he wasn't letting himself love. Like he shunned this potential daughter and her mother, and his product was failing just as his life did. And his like he was getting a little bit better, but not really doing it the right way, and that's what the next was. And then he learned to live his life the way he should be. He included his family. He embraced the fact that he had a daughter, and he embraced like how he could help her and his faults, and apologizing for his faults, and then was able to launch a product successfully.
Yeah. And it did it in a way where it didn't paint him as being a saint. I mean, he was a dick. Just flat out, he wasn't a nice guy to not only the people around him, and it was well known. I mean, I remember Howard Stern talking about it a lot, about how he had this girlfriend and kid that like he wasn't coming out saying he's supporting this person, And again, what I really loved about this is like you were saying earlier, Marisa, I got a sense of this guy. And they didn't shy away from him not being a nice guy, and the way he treated people. But as a biopic, I knew that the framework. I'm pretty sure that a lot of that didn't happen for every launch, right? But I still got a clear sense that like these are real people. These are real, they didn't make people up for the sake of, like, well, you know what, I'm going to take a little bit of this person, a little bit of... They didn't Dallas Buyers Club this movie. So I still got a sense that this was sort of kind of true here. They're not making a ton of stuff up. We're getting a good sense of this guy, even though I know it didn't play out exactly as it played out in the movie.
Some of it did, though. I'm trying to remember parts, and it's been a while ago, and I also have read the script, so I'm sure some of these things are blending in my mind. But things like the Time magazine article cover at the launch, I know that did happen at the launch. That was part of it. I'm trying to remember about the shark in particular, but there were sprinkles of like actual launch problems, and then everything that I saw, it was triggering like, oh, I remember this from the biography. Like, it was a lot of the drama was really pulled from truth.
Yeah, and I think this is a certain just like letting the film be a film, in that like I kept thinking like, does nobody respect the fact this guy has to go live in front of massive amounts of people in 20 minutes?
No, definitely. But we're kind of hitting on, for me, I think I mentioned earlier, the most bittersweet moment of this movie, which is that they do display a truth, like you said, that this guy is known for not being so friendly, for a lot of people not liking him, for making people cry. And on one hand, I'm so happy that they stuck to their guns and really stuck to the nature of the people that they were portraying. I think part of that was that they brought some of the actual people on set, had the actors meet them, so I felt like everything was very truthful. But then the bitter part is like, I was like, but I don't like him. So the whole movie I was kind of like,
but for me it worked. Well, go ahead, Zach. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I did like him. I mean, he's a dick. Like, don't get me wrong, like, he's a dick to a lot of these people, but I guess I saw his... Not that he was acting right, so I want to preface it with that, but I saw his side on all these things. Like, in the first act, when he's talking to his daughter, like, and this wasn't spelled out, just like speaking to the intelligence of the audience, like, piece these things together for yourself. It wasn't that he was denying... It's not that he set out to deny his daughter. It's that he didn't trust this woman. And so when she tells him a life-changing... Like you're her father is a life-changing sentence that a man can hear. And so to hear that from somebody that you don't trust, that you've seen proof of as being a liar, his mind is set in a way that he is like, I don't believe this is true.
I get that, but it's
the 94%.
The 94% in his logarithm from coming up with 28%.
And I'm not defending his action there specifically, but I can see where the thought process was, and I can understand, like, I guess that's getting inside of a person's head who's so out there, who seems so insane, that this movie humanized that to a point where, I don't know if it was Sorkin's writing or Fassbender's performance or probably just both at the same time.
Both.
But together, it just, I felt for this person as like, you need to get your shit together,
I mean,
Steve. But
that's the hardest part,
it.
is because for me it's like going through, and these are real people, and it's based on
Right.
real actions, and so it's like, yes, applaud, you did real, and then it's like, oh, but I don't like him being mean to his daughter, but I
Right.
don't like his ex whatever seancing or whatever saging.
Let's
the
face
house.
it, they
Like,
really painted her to be a nut
Yes.
job, and you understood why he might be that, but yet there was this product that came out, this daughter who obviously you could tell had somewhat of his smarts, and she was able to grasp things and
his
you know,
tendencies
and
to just because she was getting into his business, like
Right.
she was like, no, this is my place to fix things, so
Right.
I'm gonna come in and ask you questions because I'm gonna fix this.
Yeah, but I think too, a lot of like what happens at the beginning in the first that first segment of the movie, the first act, I'll call it, it culminates into, again, I don't think it probably went down this way at all, but it was hard not to have any emotion on the scene on top of the roof of the building when he confronts his daughter, and they have that great thing, and he says, hey, you know, I'm going to make something so you can carry all your music around with you. You don't have to lug that thing. And right there, like, okay, not only is it the invention of the iPod, but it was a really touching moment for me. And it really was the acknowledgement that, hey, you know what, I really do need to spend some more time with her. Now, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know, like, up until his passing, what his relationship with his daughter really was. In the movie, it sort of kind of makes it feel that things are going to be okay. But I didn't mind that. You know, I didn't, because the way it was portrayed at the beginning, I didn't mind that they took this melodrama a little bit.
Do you want some tidbits?
I do, absolutely.
All right, tidbits.
Yeah, please save us from
Zach
reading a
doesn't want
large
any.
book.
Yes.
Tidbits. No, this is actually a combination of two things. Q&A, Woman Got Up, was very emotionally affected by this film and asked Mr. Sorkin what the end result of Steve Jobs and his daughter's relationship was, because she really that relationship really carried through with her for the film, and he did say that it ends up where it's suggested, that they mended things, but he didn't go that far. Also, in the original script, I do believe, not in the book, in the original script of this movie, that end scene played out pretty similarly, but a little bit more messy, where when he asked her, for instance, for her paper or whatever column she wrote, her essay, he makes her dump her backpack out and actually try and rifle through and find someone. Which, when you think about it, that's a very Sorkin thing to do. It's the movement and what's not. But we've had a whole movie of movement. And this is that up on the roof, clear sky, nothing's crowded, more stillness.
Quiet. It was a quiet
just
time.
Standing.
Yeah.
And so you can see it. You can see how they adjust, how people take their writing and then sometimes even edit out their trademark scenarios to create that moment of difference.
I'm sure that this was unintentional, but during that scene when he's like, I want to read your column, I want to read your article, my thought process was, well, of course she doesn't have it on her. She needs an iPhone. So that he can just like pull it
Pull
up.
it up on your iPhone.
Hey, I'm going to take a quick break, just a quick break in our action for a second to acknowledge that we actually have a live listener or watcher, Leo Silverman, who goes on to say, one of the best movies of the year, loved Aaron's script, and so, first I want to say thank you for tuning in to us,
We actually
Leo.
have 4 people tuning in live.
But Leo's the one that's writing, so he's the
You
one that's going to
three-
get credit.
You 3 can write to us. Just there's a little dialogue box on the right.
So
But
just-
Leo
I
wants
wanna-
the 10 seconds cut out of the movie.
Yes, he wants the last 10 seconds cut out of the movie, and that's, for me, would be a little bit rough.
What was
No,
the
just to
last
talk-
10
it's
seconds?
Technically
when she's
the-
walking out into the crowd. What
Okay,
what I actually loved about that is that while you're watching all these launches, it's literally building up to the point where you think he's going to actually give a very memorable commencement speech to all these launches, and the audience doesn't see it twice. They built it up twice that we didn't see it, and then at the end, and we're going with the kinetic and the motion and all the fast-paced dialogue. I loved how the last 10 minutes of the film, it does slow down. They do go on the roof. They do have that moment to literally breathe with no one around them and no technology bothering them. It became a real life situation where a real dialogue where a human is connecting to another human, not a human connecting to technology. And then when he's walking, that slow-paced walk into a whole crowd of people who love him, I really liked how they dramatized that, because that is really what we're building up to, all these famous launches of his.
Right. So, and there is something to be said about cinematographer. Now, I'm going to butcher his last name, but it's Alwyn Kuchler. It's got the two dots up above the U. So, I think it would be Kuchler. Was the cinematographer, and he talks about that scene on top of the rooftop, and you said it. It's like clear skies, whatever. We've been indoors for pretty much 90% of this movie. From launch to whether it's a board meeting inside a garage. Yeah. It's indoors, and the one time when Steve opens up, he is outside to that. There is a nice cityscape and skyline, and he opens up to his daughter. I actually thought that was a touching moment. I thought that was, it culminated, and it came to just a nice, it's wrapping up this in a very nice way, and he's supportive now, and I really enjoyed that, and that was the cinematographer's. That's what he wanted to accomplish. It was just a very
wide open shot, and like you said, I think there's the only other shot scene outside that I remember is Steve walking with, I believe, Wozniak through a path, and it's going from point A to point B, but you're not focusing on the park they're walking through. Yeah. It is it's a medium two-shot, I think.
That was outside on the Apple campus?
I believe so. Yeah. That, it's a big difference visually about those close shots versus you're getting full frame, wide frame, full frame Steve, and the ending on the roof. It's bigger, grander, bigger idea.
Yeah, and I think the other cool thing too about this is that when they were filming, they actually used the location in Cupertino, where they were making some of that launch, and then they moved to that bigger opera house kind of the thing, which was beautiful. And again, the 35 millimeter, the way it was shot, it was such a contrast to the 80s look. This was a little more lush. We had the gold gildings and the reds were coming in. So there was a change going on. It was a change in society, change for him. And moving this next computer launch coming out, I thought was really cool. And then, the final one. Go ahead.
Yeah, interesting fact. Actually, the opera house and all these places that they had the launches and whatnot, and where they filmed it, a lot of the background talent, the extras in the back, a lot of them were actually at the original launches.
And, that's cool.
Yeah, so, and, they came, as background talent to be a part of this film, which I thought was fascinating.
That's really cool.
Yeah. This movie, and I think one of the reasons that we're able to say it has this work of art is because when you have very established people pushing for a movie, you can get your way a little more. So, at least that's my opinion and take on it. Because the studio, it would have been much cheaper for them to shoot these at other locations versus where they shot it. And the filmmakers who really took this on, they fought to use the same places, or not fought, they were just like, we're going to use the same places. And they also pushed for rehearsal time. Actors had rehearsal to get this done. They had weeks to rehearse. They also shot, I believe, in sequence.
Yeah, they shot in sequence.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they shot in
sequence. So these components, when you are able to be like, we're using the real locations, we're rehearsing, we are, and you get that by making a track list of reputable films, having good resumes, but it allows you to bring a movie like this to the screen.
And it is an unorthodox way to film and do it in sequence, but you have to have everybody there, and you got to time it out because
it's a little easier when you only have 3 locations.
Right.
And also to add to the in sequences, also Danny Boyle and Aaron Sorkin wanted the cast to actually have proper rehearsal time.
Right, absolutely.
So they had went into the production like a play aspect. You know how actors have when you're rehearsing a production, you have the first, second, and third act.
Yeah.
And that's how they went into, that was the mentality going into this film. They had the first launch, second launch, third.
Yeah.
So they spent 3 weeks learning the dialogue, learning their characters and what's going on per launch, so they can just focus on certain chunks of the film while filming.
And Danny Boyle said of Michael Fassbender that he actually came in and he had memorized the entire 180-page script. Which, like that, that's
probably
insane.
after talking to Mr. Jeff Daniels, who we approached and was like, "How am I gonna do this?" And Jeff was like, "You do it."
I don't think
More or
Aaron
less, that's
Sorkin can even
paraphrasing.
memorize his own script.
No,
It's
no,
crazy.
so-
I do think he can, 100%. I think he knows it.
He
Talk
might
about
do
it
that,
too, because we were talking about, and again, for me, from the cinematography aspect, when you look at the changes, where he used, he was inspired by people like Orson Welles, like his failure in his firing. He said, came right out of Citizen Kane. He goes, I wanted a slightly skewed look, wide angle lenses. He goes, the second act had a little bit of Blue Velvet. And that's where I think, for me, the David Fincher part came in. David Fincher has a color palette in his movies, and that color palette was a little bit similar, but he also said The Godfather because it was like so lush. We were talking about the reds, and I find that it really helped move that story along. I want to talk about, let's talk a little bit. Let's start with some of these performances, because we know that this movie was paced. I thought this movie was paced wonderfully, but I think the performances really carry this along. I said up front, and we talked about, I felt that Fassbender, who doesn't look anything like him, but I didn't care. I wasn't taken out of the movie because I was so engaged in his performance and how his interaction. I could believe that this is how Steve Jobs interacted with people. Kate Winslet, like you said, she was invisible because it took me. Wait, is that's the Titanic? What? She looks, wow. She was fantastic. She got the accent down. I don't know these people, but they were great, and they were lost in their performances, and that. So long as it doesn't take me out of the movie, in fact, I thought they brought me further in.
Yeah, I thought that it was a combination of great performances and really like becoming those people. Like Fassbender, I thought did a good job becoming not Fassbender. He became this person who's very driven and has like little tics and things.
It was great though, because it wasn't like they were imitating these people. It was that they embraced them as their own and found their own way of portraying those people's attitudes and habits. Right. So it wasn't like he watched a launch and repeated his movements. It's not identical. It's the essence that they were able to capture.
Yeah. It was I guess you watch that footage, what you can find, and like what's the person behind that, because that is acting. When real Steve Jobs is on the stage, he's acting. So what are the little things that can drive the version of him that's behind the stage? Right.
Yeah, and I got totally engaged and lost in his performance, as well as everybody else. And again, I think that Christian Bale was supposed to be Steve Jobs originally, and he dropped out. And to me, I think Christian Bale, again, he is not a guy that looks like Steve Jobs at all. And I think he could have pulled off the performance. But after, you see Michael Fassbender, he owned the performance. I'm not sure how much better Bale would have done. So, Fassbender for me, very nominatable, I think.
Yeah,
and
I
best
think
actor category.
Bale would have brought the egotism part to it a little bit more, and I don't think I needed that. What I liked about this is that this guy was clearly an egotist, but the way he delivered it didn't feel like it. Like, from what he's saying and what he's doing, this guy has a huge ego. Yeah. But
good for you.
At the same time, he has enough charisma that you want him to like you. You still you're like, you're an asshole, but you're cool. I still
you got that.
Yeah.
Division.
But cool in the sense of like you're a powerful person that I want to be near, even though you're driving me away with everything you do.
It's almost like beaten, battered wife syndrome, too. I mean, they're looking for... because listen, in a work environment, these people are looking for his acceptance, even though he will beat them down. And it's like you said earlier, or Zach had said earlier, these people are smart people within their own right. They wouldn't be in the positions that they are if they weren't smart, and yet he still would beat them down. And a lot of these people are looking for acceptance from the man who is their boss, and perhaps the smartest man in the room. All these people are way smarter than me. We do this. I talk about movies. These people are inventing things that I use, and so, there is that acceptance level where, these people were working hard. They wanted to put a product out, yes. They wanted it to succeed, yes. But at the same time, I also got the sense they wanted the acceptance of their boss, their surrogate father in a way. And you take the abuse, and it's like saying, well, yeah, but I did this right. And then this movie was showing that some people are just going to stand up to this because they actually start to realize their self-worth. And we had three, I believe, examples of this. We had Seth Rogen's character as Wozniak, who kept on fighting, like, you have to recognize these people, and that came to a head. You had the other gentleman, I forget his name, the other...
Scully.
No, not Scully.
Andy Hertzfeld.
Yeah, Andy Hertzfeld, who was like, at the beginning of the movie, he was a beaten man. He's like, Jesus Christ, I'm trying to put this. I can't make it say hello. I don't know what. And his workaround, albeit unethical, I give him that was smart, right? But in the end, he was like, he needed the acceptance until the second act and the third. He started to go, listen, man. You know what? I respect you. I'm just as smart too, and you're not even taking care of your daughter. Like, that whole dynamic came down, and then of course you had Kate Winslet's character, who I felt she didn't get as much of a beating, but she ended up being the moral compass of the story, and she kept on taking it, but she would give it back.
She also fought for this role.
Yeah, and she did. And Kate Winslet said in a lot of interviews that, she actually met with Joanne, the real Joanna Hoffman, and spent a lot of time together. And every time they were doing research, Kate Winslet found out that Joanna was, again, that moral compass, but was the only person who actually had the courage to stand up to Steve Jobs, tell him when he was in the wrong, and throughout all these years, and in a way ground him. And with all the tension that he created with all of his coworkers, she still stuck with him by his side, and for that I applaud her.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Kate Winslet, when getting this role, she found out not through the production team. She found out, I believe, through a makeup artist or someone along those lines who got a job on the Steve Jobs movie and told Kate Winslet, like, I got this job on the Steve Jobs movie, and Kate Winslet was like, I want to be a part of this movie, and more or less through agents or whatnot in casting, got her name put into the pool, and just had the right timing where it wasn't cast yet, and they were getting everyone in order, and so she got in there because it sparked her interest.
Right. And what I loved about too her role, her performance, and the way that it was written. Sometimes she's a very hard woman. Like, she was very driven. But sometimes a hard woman can come off as being bitchy. The way that it could be portrayed, the perceived in the wrong light. She wasn't. Like, she was perceived as she could be strong, she could be smart. She didn't demean other people. She saw the softness to the Steve Jobs, but she also saw the plight of everybody else. She didn't come off like, in some cases a marketing person or a publicity person can be hard as backs, and they might too also not be too nice. But I loved how her character was portrayed, because she was portrayed as smart, strong, with a heart, and she had the sentimentality and sympathies of the other people working around her. She was, in a sense, their champion. And I just love that. And again, I think that Kate Winslet should be commended, whether it's a nomination or something. But I thought it was a really well-written, smart woman role. And when, we're in an industry now where, women's equality and there, not enough good roles, this was a fantastic role, I thought, and Kate Winslet knocked it out of the park.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, I really liked Seth Rogen in this role, and this is one that, like, I thought was a good performance, and it was also just really good casting, in that, like, this is, like, Steve Wozniak is, like, a crazy guy. Like, he's like an out there person. So Seth Rogen was a good choice because it brought some levity to this role, and like the way that this guy is portrayed or portrays himself in the public. Like, he's a weird guy. But it for me was little things that he did, because it wasn't like this huge departure from who Seth Rogen is, or at least how we know him. But there was little things, like I noticed him playing with his hands a lot.
Yeah.
Like when he's confronting Jobs in the orchestra pit, he's really nervous. Like, he's standing up to him, but he keeps rubbing his palm,
Pushing up his glass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was an interesting component. I'm glad you brought this up, because I walked out of this movie being like, I really, really enjoyed how he played Wozniak. Whereas I was with someone who really wanted, outside of Joanna, because she's very centered, they wanted a very combative counterpart to Steve Jobs. Like, they wanted to see two people be able to stand on the same footing and go head to head because of what that can add to a film. But for me, I was like, I was very happy that Steve always kind of seemed to be standing on a higher step than Woz, argumentatively. I'm not talking about their smarts.
Absolutely.
But in status of how they react to each other. I thought that, like, some people kind of proposed the question that they wanted to see a bigger arc from Woz on his behalf, for him really not only to be able to talk to him, but for him to kind of gain that momentum and step up to that same step and be able to have this back and forth, who knows who's going to win. Versus for me, whenever I saw Steve and Woz get into an argument or discussion, I just never doubted that Steve was always going to win in this film. Did you guys want someone who could...
I didn't really want that, because in real life we know how that was like. And also, I think from a filmmaking standpoint, they purposely always put Steve physically higher than Wozniak. I mean, if you got to remember, even the blocking of the last scene, Steve's on a stage. He's literally on a platform talking down to Wozniak, and like, so I think it's just the cinematography choice and that aspect where they really adds to just the story that no matter what, Steve's still gonna have the last say in everything.
Yeah, he's gonna have the last say, but the thing is like whether he's right or wrong. And that's the interesting part of it all, because some of his logic just did not fly, and all he had to do is just give some mention, and he just would not budge. I mean, he was the Rock of Gibraltar. He wouldn't move at all. And on one part, you guys, well, Jesus Christ, just give him, like, stop for a minute. And I didn't necessarily, I love that confrontation at the end. Not that, even according to Wozniak, he says, no one's ever seen us argue, and it didn't happen. Nothing. He goes, he did approach him about the Apple II people, but not to that sense. I don't mind that was overly dramatized, because it gave us a really great scene. We know that in some, you read the book, so in some way, shape, or form, that really, some conversation took place about it.
Definitely, because some of that argument, or I believe the one you're referencing, is media related. What was either said freely or coerced or whatnot into talking to the media about Jobs' departure. Like that, it's out there.
Right,
You can
absolutely.
find it. So, you know, you have to take that on part with what happened in their relationship. But it's hard to capture what their friendship of years and years and years and their ups and downs, like, imagine that much time inventing with someone, working with someone, them seeing everything going on. Like, that's a lot to. So I was completely fine with what was dramatized or what they tried to show.
It works in the movie. You know, the other great line too is, like, you know, while he says, I'm gonna paraphrase. You know, he says, like, you know, you get a free pass. And, like, that is, like, the height of, like, his ego is the size of freaking Russia. Whereas, you know, we've been friends, and, like, you're saying something stupid now, but you know what? You get a free pass. And I loved how that argument came. It's like, oh my God, you are such a jerk now.
So condescending.
It's so condescending.
The thing that he thinks is, like, it's a really nice
like a
thing.
compliment.
Like, no, you
in my
get
circle.
whatever in my book. Like, you're cool. And it's like, no, just saying that makes you a dick.
Yeah, just say, and going to Seth Rogen's performance, you know, to me it was, he's just I think I don't know how it went down, but in my silly head, I picture Jonah Hill going, you know what, dude? If you want people to take you more seriously, you need to take a Moneyball. You need to get into a Wolf of Star.
The Jonah Hill thing. They came to him.
Yeah, well, but and they may have came to him, and that's great. But he said yes, and and I think for him. Look, maybe not all the Seth Rogen fans are running out to see Seth Rogen play Wozniak, but I think he did a really good job. He's not a focal part of the movie, and it's like he's not in it. He's in it enough, but he's not the star as we're used to seeing him.
I'll tell you, as a fan of Seth Rogen. Yeah. That was a real selling point for me when they started talking about this movie, and they cast Christian Bale, they cast Michael Fassbender. I'm like, that's fine. Like, I'm sure they'll be good. That's fine. When they cast Seth Rogen, I was like, that's an interesting choice. I want to see that performance.
Yeah.
That was the performance I was most interested to see.
It was and look, if you're going to get into an argument with Michael Fassbender or Steve Jobs, he held his own. I thought he did a really good job.
Yeah.
In all of his scenes. And I also liked the actor that played Andy. I thought he did a really good job because he wasn't as forceful as Wozniak, but he was still he would actually put his head down and stuff, but he's like, I paid for your daughter, but she came to me and I wanted to help her, and you seem to forget that I've known her since she was 6. Again, it was great dialogue, but great dialogue can sound dead in the wrong actors, coming out of the wrong actor's mouth. These people got it. They worked hard. It's just like The Social Network or any Aaron Sorkin. Casting is so important.
Yeah. It's hard to find a weak part in this movie. Yeah. Unless you it's just everyone really played their part.
There really isn't a weak part. Mm-hmm. I couldn't even point to you to something that I thought could be stronger. You could argue whether it's the best or not, but it was exactly what this movie was supposed to be, and then some.
But can I throw something out there to our live audience as well, right? When you heard this project was coming, was going to be coming into, and this is before any marketing hit or whatever. Was it a topic that you cared to go see?
No.
In a theater, okay. So I felt the same way. Go ahead.
I think we can also speak to. I think my answer goes partially to what Dr. Spectacular said about Fassbender comparing to Kutcher and Long, etc. For me, that in conjunction with, I went into this movie having read the book, knowing from the book that while very interested in this man's career, that I already was not a big fan of him, who he was as a person.
Right.
The book, I was like, by the end of it, I was just like,
what a prick.
Wow.
Yeah.
He did an amazing thing in technology, but be nice.
Be nice.
And so coming into that, and then I watched the Kutcher film, and it didn't really strike me as memorable.
Okay.
It's one of those ones where I'm like, yeah, I saw part of that. So when I compare it, this was a memorable film. Yeah. I don't know, I'm not going to put that fully on Fassbender or Kutcher. It's just the material, what this project was. This one to me stands out.
But this
more.
Is after, and I agree, but going into it, and again, you read the book, were you yeah, I really want to see this movie?
No, because I didn't know if I wanted to see a movie about someone who I was not going to be on the same team for.
Yeah.
I saw it because we were covering it,
right.
And I'm very glad that I did.
Fair enough. And
see, I had a general interest, having saw the first Jobs movie a few years ago. I learned so much from that film. I learned so much about Steve Jobs that I personally didn't know. So from that's what I can also take. And I think Ashton Kutcher did a great job in that film. And I want to keep comparing. But, Dr. Spectacular is asking us in the chat, thank you. I think what was so great about this portrayal of Jobs from Fassbender is that he brought it with such a dramatic force that every word dripping with disdain, you still had to respect the guy, even if he was the biggest a-hole in the world. Yeah. And I personally, I'm a PC person, but I work with Macs, I work with Apples, and I respect what Steve Jobs as a person did for the world.
Yeah.
He revolutionized technology and how we communicate and how we work in the working environment and how we listen to music in our entertainment. So I feel with Fassbender, like, he brought such a presence to Steve Jobs that a lot of people didn't know about.
And again, well, and where I'll go to, because my answer to the question that I was posing is, like, when I heard about the project, I was like, okay. It wasn't until I actually saw the first trailer for this movie, and I looked at it, and I was like, you know what? This looks like it could be a good movie. Like, I would go see this movie. It looks exciting. It looks like it could be Social Network-ish. And there's an obvious parallel there. But I mean, prior to that, I was like, okay, Steve Jobs, we've already had one that failed, and do I really care? Like, I understand I have Apple products, and to answer Tomas Zelenka, he's like, do you have an idea why this movie didn't connect with wide audiences? And I think for me, it's a great question, and thank you very much. I think for me, I think it's twofold. I think that you were saying he wasn't that nice of a guy.
We've already had one.
Yeah, we already had one. He's still sort of, even though he's passed away, he's still sort of in the public consciousness. I mean, it's hard not to think of Steve Jobs every time there's a new Apple product that comes out. And I also think that marketing slipped. I think really, like, they opened this movie up limited. It did fantastic. And I don't think marketing picked up the baton to drive it to go. It went wide and nobody knew.
The limited thing, like, all the billboards in LA just say October. So, like, I know that, like, like, it's only now the last week of October. So, like, if you don't put the date, we don't know when you're putting it out. The limited thing is always going to soften your wide and release. But I think it comes down to, for me, like, the way that I heard about this movie, and the first one hadn't come out yet. Like, they were both like being developed when I heard about this, and that just having two movies about a guy who only died a few years ago. So the general audience, I think, is just sort of like, what am I going to see about this guy? Right. He designed my phone, and that's great, but if you don't know the ins and outs of his life, which I think most people don't, you don't. What is there to see? This isn't a story about a president who's fighting wars, and you're like, oh, there's drama there. That could be a good movie.
Absolutely.
It's tougher to see the drama behind the guy that made my phone.
I think it's also
a gajillionaire.
Yeah.
I think it's also just the content that this film covers. If you think about it, it's all Americans. It's an American story that happens in America. There really wasn't any moment where it takes them internationally. Like, this is happening in China. This technology, we got to beat them. You know, it didn't widen the range of the demographic in a way. So that could have also been a reason why we couldn't. Our demographic understands.
It has a narrow margin.
It does.
I mean, it's going to. I think if you, marketing wise, had really targeted the people who saw this tech boom or have been impacted by this tech boom, but you know, it's not a family movie.
No, but there are many movies that were released in a limited release. Yeah. I mean, in a lot of cases, you go limited to get that news story out as to how well you went. Before I go into that, I do want to. Michael Stolberg is the gentleman who played Andy Hertzfeld. I want to give him credit because I thought he was fantastic.
Do we have numbers?
Yeah, we do. And usually, you know, the movie opened up. It opened up in 4 theaters, and it did $521,000. So that's an average of $130,000+ per location. It came in number 16. They got to boast a very high per-screen average.
I think it was the highest of the year besides American Sniper when it was in limited. When it was in limited, the limited release, if I remember correctly, it was the highest of the whole year.
Yeah.
In American Sniper, like, was breaking records when it came out. So it really had some buzz.
No, there was a lot of buzz going into it. I just think that Universal, they just didn't ride that wave enough to let people I mean, because there was people talking about it. They went to the 4 locations. It was selling out. I know couldn't go to the Landmark that weekend out here in Los Angeles. Couldn't see it there because it was sold out. So there was this great buzz, and I was hearing about performances and everything. And then, like, okay, and then it just sort of kind of opened. And there was nothing, and again, there's a ton of film out there, and I think some movies are getting lost in the shuffle for more adult, like, drama, so to speak. But this movie, like, had a shot, but then when it went wide, which, you know, it went from, catch this, it goes from 4 theaters, and then its widest opening, it came in number 7, it went to 2,493 theaters. So, you know, and it opened on October 9th, and then, no, it wasn't until October 23rd, so we got about, 2 weeks of limited release, and then you blast it open to almost 3,000 locations, but you didn't really tell any, like, I knew it was coming out, but I didn't know if it was the week after,
I was confused when it was coming out.
You were confused?
Like, and I pay attention to this stuff, and I wasn't sure.
Also, like, the media, like, I'm trying to remember if it was doing well. I'm trying to remember good word of mouth. Like, if you do marketing well, we should know all of that.
Well, because that's the thing, I think
we should be able to answer these without having to fully, like, look up every single detail.
Yeah,
See, I knew about this film when they were filming it as well, because if you guys can recall the whole debacle that went down with Sony Pictures and whatnot, all the leaked emails from the runners of that network, and one of the leaked emails was that they're like, let's focus on Steve Jobs' film. And so I knew during the production there was, like, a lot of already going into Steve Jobs. People wanted to focus on creating that. And then I personally am just a big fan of Aaron Sorkin. To watch The Newsroom, I was obsessed with it. It was amazing, and everything else Aaron Sorkin has done. And I think just going into from a general film goer, I was just a fan of the general cast that was in this. So I wanted to see it in that way too.
Yeah.
There were a lot of reasons I wanted to see this movie. I just, like, the specific release of it was, like, this slow way where, like, I had, like, a friend who posted on Facebook that they saw it. So I'm like, oh, it's out, but it's not.
But where is it out?
Yeah. And so it became, like, when I'm planning out my weekends or my weeks, like, well, there's other things coming out. There's other things to do. I know this is happening. I'm not even sure where this movie is. And it just, like, in the ADD world that iPhones have created, I had other things to do. Right. And it just, like, wasn't at the forefront.
You sort of kind of forget it. And it's going to be interesting to see, because at this point, look, the movie has made close to $12 million. I think they were expecting a little bit more, especially with... Look, they were
$30 million budget.
$30 million budget, but we're getting an 85% Rotten Tomatoes. The cinema score, audiences, it's an A-, meaning audiences are liking it. Mm-hmm. So you figure that there's good word of mouth. We're giving it good word of mouth. We're, helping. But the only thing at this point that I think that could help it, and it might be a little bit too far up, being we're in October, is when it comes nomination season. And by that time, the movie, unless Universal pushes for re-release and to try to grab some extra screens coming in late December and January, and that's going to be hard to do, that's the only, at this point, it's almost like you were saying. You thought it was lost. You didn't know when it was coming out. Mm-hmm. You, too, were like, when's this coming out? And you knew the production. Did you follow its release pattern? That much?
I knew there was an early release. I didn't know the exact date until I looked on Thursday when movies do come out.
Right.
So I was like, okay, it's out. I'm going to plan on seeing it. But again, I think that also plays up with the marketing's getting mixed along with the first 4 runners of who wants to be nominated for Academy Award, along with the mix of all the horror thriller movies that are coming out because it's Halloween time.
The horror thrillers are coming out. The Star Wars took over the news cycle in terms of ticket sales.
There wasn't a really good time for, I mean, if it was released in the summer, it might have been better, because the other Steve Jobs film that came out a couple years ago,
do you think it would have done better?
That came out in the summer.
2 weeks from now?
No, I think they picked a decent time.
I just don't think they marketed it.
They didn't hit the people hard enough as they should have, because again, we all said it here. Okay, it's about Steve Jobs. yeah, he's rich. We know he didn't treat people well. Why am I going to be invested? But we sat down, we watched this movie, and it's a great movie.
Yeah.
The word of mouth came out in that limited release as to how good a movie it is. They should have been, they should have just been like ads all over TV with all of the reviews about how great this movie is. Michael Fassbender, who's, you know, he's riding a nice peak right now too. He's got things going on in his career that people know of him. You know, Kate Winslet. If you market this after that wave, you just ride that wave. You hold on to it and you bludgeon people to say, hey, this awesome movie's coming out. You're going to like this movie.
Yeah, maybe that's where it falls then. Like, I think maybe in the today, word of mouth does not take a week. It does not take 2 weeks. It takes 12 hours. If you release a movie on a Friday, word of mouth is fast enough that you will have those sales on Friday night. Yeah, Saturday, even Friday night. People, like, I've already heard by 8 o'clock, Steve Jobs is really good. Oh, there's a 10 o'clock showing.
Yeah.
Go for that.
But it's also social media now, and computers, and does the social media via word of mouth?
Yeah.
It could even cut that time.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, but for an adult movie like this,
at 8. I saw watch the movie at 10.
There you go.
An adult movie like this doesn't necessarily rely that heavily on the social media. You gotta really bludgeon the people with advertising, marketing. You gotta get it out there. Like, it's at 85% Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty good. There are some bad reviews out there, but for the most part, that's fresh. You stick with those high-end reviews. You get that audience to go to it. You get that older audience to see a movie. But now we've got, like, The Martian's just been... Well, it seems like there's no competition out there, and it's because nobody knows that there's no competition out there. Like, if you want to see an adult movie, it's like, oh, well, I'm going to go see Goosebumps, or, oh, The Martian's doing great. I'm going to go see The Martian. Well, what about the Steve Jobs? What? That movie's out? Oh, I didn't know. Well, I already got my ticket for The Martian. I'm going to go, and that's more of an adult movie. You were going to...
No, I just think that, yes, we obviously, like... There's something missing, and that seems to be it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this film did premiere at the
I hope that answered your question somewhat. And the Social Network, he mentioned the Social Network did very well. And again, how are you going to make a movie? We'll talk just a couple of seconds because Aaron Sorkin wrote Social Network. You had David Fincher directing. And again, when I heard they were making a movie about Facebook, I'm like, who cares? Like, it's why do I care?
Well, actually,
they cared because it ended up being a damn good movie, and they stayed away from this is a movie about Facebook. This is more of a movie about people. And you're going to be engaged, and this has great dialogue, and it was a great direction. And when I saw Social Network, I said, well, I was wrong. This movie is fantastic.
Well, I think the other thing about Social Network is that if you remember, 2010 was a huge year for Facebook. Like, Facebook was the social network to beat. Twitter wasn't as big. Instagram wasn't as big. It was that was the social platform to be on. And they peaked at that time. And that, I felt like Social Network talked to the younger teenager to middle-aged adult, that specific demographic that was purposely on Facebook, the college demographic. Whereas now it's like a lot of adults are now, adults and celebrities are now on Facebook too. Great for them, but again, older demographic. Back in 2010, it spoke directly to my demographic. I was in college. I was in Facebook. I wanted to go see that film, and it was amazing. So you put just Facebook into that film, everyone knows what Facebook was. Everyone's just going to see it because they think it's about Facebook. And then it ended up just being a good movie.
For me, I could have cared less. It wasn't until I started hearing how amazing of a movie that it was.
Were you on Facebook at that time?
No, I'm not on Facebook now.
But exactly. It spoke to the demographic that was purposely on Facebook at that time.
Yeah,
it's also different. Like, we titled this movie is Steve Jobs. Like, that was the Social Network. Like, yes, it is about people in real life situations, but this wasn't like Apple.
Right.
Yeah, but I think
Apple, the movie.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to what people are going to see it is you want to see dramatization of the thing that you experience. This is about the experience from the 80s through the 90s, and then like peeking into this century. But The Social Network was marketed to, like Marisa, as you said, like we felt so connected to that movie being in college because that was the time where it started as a college network, and like we were
I was in college
when I joined Facebook. I had to have an edu address, like email address. You couldn't join until you got your college email address, and that was a dividing line. And so you felt like you journeyed with it. You saw, oh no, they're bringing in high schoolers. This is terrible. They're bringing in our parents now.
Now they're bringing in the adults.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but we had that arc with it, and so we wanted to see the story behind what we experienced, and so this was one more step separated, I think, from the people that were in college during The Social Network.
Yes, but if the movie had been just about what you said, I would have cared less.
But we knew there was more to that story, so we wanted to know, but we were still connected emotionally to the product.
And yet the movie itself, the movie Social Network itself, really wasn't about Facebook. Like, you know, it was about Facebook, but it really wasn't about Facebook,
exactly.
which
behind it.
really made, but it was the idea, the drama, how, you know, that the schism between the two best friends, you know, I really like that. In this movie, you're right, it's Steve Jobs. It's one, and it's Apple. And
I feel like Sarah's laughing at us right
I'm
now.
laughing at
probably
you
is.
because you just went on a whole thing about the Social Network and Facebook, and it was like very funny, and I was like, hey guys.
Yes. We are Steve Jobs.
But somebody's, you know, and again, Tomas had said the Social Network did very well. He was making, and I get it. It's a good comparison, you know, especially if Danny Boyle feels that this is like the second part of what could be a trilogy. I don't know what the next movie would be.
Snapchat. We get it in six. We get a feature film in 6 seconds.
Great. So
Disappears
you know, but
afterwards.
Steve Jobs, I think the marketing, I think there was a misstep, and I saw it, really enjoyed it. It's one of my favorites of the year. And you know, it's a movie, and again, it was just so beautiful. It was the way that it was shot. You know, this is a movie that I could wholeheartedly recommend to somebody, and they're gonna come out going, "Wow, that was a really good movie." I may have learned a little bit about something, but it's a good story to begin with. If you change the names of all these people, you still have a good movie.
Who do you guys feel like you could recommend this movie to? Do you feel like there's a limit on it?
Definitely my parents, people. I mean,
the older
anyone
demographic.
the older demographic, and anyone who enjoys film.
Yeah,
Like this is
absolutely.
a great film, and so if you enjoy it, if you like any kind of film, if you want to appreciate a movie, this is one to see. It's great for other people too because it's just interesting beyond that. But if if you like studying movies, this is something to check out.
I agree.
Absolutely.
It's a nice, as you said, work of
And
art.
you said parents, and
Well,
I could recommend this to my dad.
I always recommend anything Aaron Sorkin to my parents.
Yeah.
Because that's, you know, it's just, we understand.
Gates.
We understand Aaron Sorkin, his mentality, his dialogue, how he gets from point A to point B
Yes.
in a topic of conversation.
and he's
like,
been on a
I
roll.
get that. I get his mental thought train.
Yeah.
I really do.
And it's good. You know, Tomas writes, if there is a trilogy, it would be named Gates. Good
good
one.
point.
That's
you,
a
Tomas.
We
good
need
one.
a
Thank
movie
you.
about Bill
But
Gates.
Or
you
just
know,
window.
window,
Singular.
window, singular. So yeah, and I agree. I mean, recommending it, I would definitely recommend it. It's like you said, my friends who love movies, I would say, yeah, you're gonna love this because it's got everything that great performances, great dialogue, good story, good execution of how the story is told. I could easily recommend this to my dad. Like you could. Like this, you know. I think even to an extent, my mom who only likes, you know, she's like, she will always go to me, "Isn't that a nice movie for me to see out there?" And I'm like,
Your mom and
I
my
don't
mom
know.
should go to the movies.
Oh,
My
they
mom's
should.
Like, my mom's like, Lifetime Happiness, ABC Family Christmas. I'm like,
I need a nice
Hallmark.
movie to go to. And I don't know if this is necessarily nice, but she still might like it. My brother was, you know, like, I would recommend it to friends and family. And like you said, all my friends who haven't seen it yet who like movies. This is a good movie.
I'd recommend it to the older demographic, the adult demographic. I would not recommend this to kids. They're not going to understand it. So it does have a specific, you know,
Yeah, perhaps,
range.
but it's a good time capsule movie. I just hope that people go see it now because I think there's going to be some attention given to it come nominations, whether it's Golden Globes or Academy, and by that time, it may not be as accessible as it is
Well,
today.
let me ask you guys, just like who we're recommending it to. Do you guys plan on seeing it again?
I would definitely see it again.
But
When-
but
when
are
I
you
left-
are you going to go out of your way to see it again?
Probably not.
No, there's too much coming out for me to say that right now.
Not necessarily in this season, but like, are you
I
going to go
will-
buy the
Yes.
Blu-ray? Are you going
I
to?
would see it again.
Yes,
And
the
that-
moment when I walked out of that movie, when I walked out of Steve Jobs, I don't know if I could have said that. I was like, yeah, I could maybe watch this a couple more times. But thinking back on it, I really do want to see it again. It's not just like I could see it again. I would like to see this movie again.
Yeah.
I think Aaron Sorkin, just his content and it's so fast paced that a viewer is more likely to miss something. And so it has that ability that you have to watch it again because you just want to know everything that he just talked about.
Yeah.
And I think too, there have been many a times where we've had discussion here, and it's made me want to watch a movie again.
This has definitely been one of those cases. Like, I don't know that I'd pay for it again.
Right.
But if there was like a Blu-ray copy I could just go get, I would do.
Yeah,
I would get it so I could see it again.
I'm not patting ourselves on the back, but I'm patting ourselves on the back. I'm just saying, I really think that our discussion at times was various movies, including this one. Marisa, you and I did Crimson Peak. And so after talking about movies this way, it does, in a sense, I go, wow, I can go back and something you might have said would resonate. And you go, I want to see if I can pick that up. Or Zach, you would have said. And that's what I enjoy about doing this, this kind of format and form, because we are not a soundbite. I was explaining this show to somebody. We are not a soundbite review show. We are a full dissection, and I'm hoping that our live audience too, they might even go back. I've read comments where people said, I'm definitely going to go see it again.
And if you enjoy what we do,
Yeah.
be sure to subscribe, rate on iTunes, and click the like on YouTube. Thanks,
you-
guys.
That was a great voice. Your voice just transformed. I wanted
That
to
was- that
subscribe
was-
again.
That was scary. That was is that your
Fantastic.
Halloween? That was great.
I guess.
Announcer guy?
It's my announcer guy, boys.
Great
That's
voice.
Well,
fantastic.
Speaking
I
of
think we
sound,
should-
can we talk a little bit
Yeah,
about the
absolutely.
soundtrack
Sure,
and
sure.
whatnot? We had Daniel Pemberton, who also worked on The Counselor and Man from U.N.C.L.E. We did a dissection on that. But he actually, he composed the film. He read all 185 pages for this film. I mean, it's only a 2-hour film, but as we know, Aaron Sorkin speaks really fast. There's a lot of
Steve
dialogue.
Jobs really pulls the most out of people.
Definitely.
That's
It
insane.
just
that,
drives
like,
them to do work.
150% of a movie is in this movie.
Yeah, and he kind of had the same workflow as the cinematography. You know how cinematography went from 60 millimeter to 35 to digital. He went from, in Act 1, he went from orchestra, keyboards, and whatnot, and then he went into more synthesized music as the timeline progressed. And when it came to the last act, he used a lot of actual Max sounds from the computer. It was straight up just Max sounds.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
and there was less music in the end as well.
Yeah.
and this movie I thought used that was another great thing too that brought us up to speed. Was the use of source music of that time era. So that helped denote that we just, we're so many years have passed, we're here now. So, like I said, I felt the framework of this movie was very original and engaging enough that I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel lost at all with the time leaps that this movie made. Anybody here, right? Am I wrong? Am I crazy
No,
about that?
I mean, once I realized what they were doing, I was fully on board.
Right.
Like, it took me a minute, once they jumped to the second one, then I'm like, are we at another product launch? Is that
Yeah.
oh, that's what we're... And then the third one comes in, like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's
got
cool.
it.
I got it
Got
now.
it.
This is what we're here for.
All right. Well,
It did make
is
me
there
wanna-
anything else that we missed that we didn't talk about? I know that we talked somewhat about editing, and the editor should get some credit because Elliot Grand did a really good job in piecing all of this together. And when you're filming sequentially, I guess that could help an editor. But at the same time, he's got to figure out what he's got to cut out when you're filming in sequence and going, how do I tighten this up? And
And how to make the transitions
how to make
flow.
these transitions. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
I did-
and
I
that
did-
helps with your clarity.
Absolutely.
He definitely.
I did love the cinematography, and there were some shots, especially I believe it was the second launch when they're in the tunnel, underneath the orchestra, I believe, or underneath the sound stage. And I love that shot. It kind of reflected he's having tunnel vision right now. He's not seeing clearly, and they had the whole topic of what was perspective. He had a different skewed perception on the world that everyone else doesn't understand him, and I really like that. And then the last launch when he's alone in his office, that you could tell we actually had that 2-minute moment with Steve Jobs after he's distraught. He's taking off his glasses and his jump cuts here and there. And for someone who's so put together,
Right.
you saw him break up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I love the scene in the tunnel because he literally, the world is moving because of him. Like, people are stomping on the ground to where his world is shaking because they love him so much.
Yeah, or they just can't wait to hear, what's next. Okay, there is one scene that we do have to talk about, too. And again, when it goes under the fact or fiction, it's the scene where he's talking to Kate Winslet in the bathroom. You and I were talking about this. And he goes into the bathroom, and then he takes off his shoes, he takes off his socks, and I'm like going, oh, okay, it's a public bathroom, that's gross.
Yeah.
And then you hear plop, and I'm like, what the hell? He washed his feet.
Was that a thing he did?
Apparently it was. That is a
So just
fact.
rest on that.
It relieved stress for him in one way. And coming from a person who is a known
medically,
vegan.
I mean, that
makes
makes sense. You cooling
it does not make sense.
No, cooling
make
down
sense.
feet.
What? But did he?
I get that, but
There's
did
a
he
lot
just
of nerve endings.
get a
on your-
hose?
No,
Not
there's
in
a lot of
wash-
nerve endings on your feet.
He just put his feet in the
Did
toilet.
he just wash his
cooling
feet, or did he always put it in a toilet?
Put
That's
it in
my
the
question.
toilet. He put it in a toilet.
Yes.
Like, nobody could bring him like a nice
I don't
bucket
know.
of water.
All I know is he put his feet in the toilet on
Yeah.
purpose.
That's
Yeah,
nasty.
For pleasure.
Yeah.
But
I don't
I'm
get it.
thinking scientifically, there are a lot of nerve endings in the feet.
No, but
I-
that's the thing is, I
I
get that
get
if you
it.
like to cool
Yeah.
down your body, like that is useful. But it's
Get
the
a
toilet
hose.
part.
Get a bucket with
They're
ice.
in a
Not a
He
toilet.
could have had them bring him
In
a
a
nice
sink.
crystal bucket of
Anything.
of like spring water
Anything
to
other
dip
than-
his feet.
Anything other than a public
Anything.
toilet.
Anything.
Anyways,
Yeah.
so I want to
That's a
talk
bit
to.
twisted.
We'll go back 1 second regarding cinematography. This guy has done. He did Divergent. He did Hannah. He did R.I.P.D. He did Sunshine, which
Great film.
this guy has done like a lot
Alvin?
of stuff. But I think that
Alvin.
Alwyn Kuchla. I want to say that this movie, I think, is his pinnacle. This movie looked fantastic.
Yeah,
in
there's
all.
one, the garage scene really stood out to me.
Great scene.
There's a lot because of like while he's talking about like we're getting him talking about form factor and right angles, and you have these shots, these like slightly wider shots of him because he's so focused on this big picture, and these tight shots of Waz like on an angle, like who's like, no, you have to go outside the system and like be different, and it's like this weird imbalance that was just a brilliant move on both the cinematographer that we cannot pronounce and Danny Boyle.
Those people.
Yeah.
The really talented people who made the movie.
Yes.
So,
but it was really good. I really enjoyed like that. For some reason,
Yeah, that's a great moment.
that little jump back and forth stood
Yeah,
out
it's
to
good
me.
stuff.
It's funny, like my moment that sticks out, I don't even know where it's in the movie, but I can just see it, where they're going from an upward angle and there's like these really clean like lamps.
Oh,
And
yeah.
going through. And like, I can't tell you part of the movie, but it just looked so nice.
It
And
was
I remember
the
being
When he's in his
it was the
office.
holding
Yeah.
room for the third.
I believe so.
announcement.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it just
he's in his
it
office.
just I was just like, I love how this
Yeah.
looks.
Yeah.
It looks great.
Yeah, it looked fantastic. So if this is one of the movies that we talk about where the collaboration, everybody was working and clicking on all cylinders. So it
I'm telling
was
you,
really
it's the
good.
Steve Jobs power.
That could be.
Pulls
Could
the
be.
most out of you.
Yeah, makes
That
you go
is his
bye,
glory.
bye.
And I think that's also, Danny Boyle's too. He
Absolutely.
has a very creative visual
Absolutely.
look to all of
Absolutely.
his films.
Yeah, one of the themes that we didn't get a chance to touch on at length that that really another thing that stood out to me is the idea of Steve Jobs. Is he a doer or like leading the orchestra? Like what is like is like that was posits
he
like
offer?
like what do you do? Like
Right.
he plays the orchestra, and it's something that I find fascinating as and it translates to filmmaking as well. There's so many instances of people who it's not about like what you actually do, but like how you bring it from other people. Right. Like the scene at the very top of the movie. Like they wouldn't have been able to get the machine to say hello if he hadn't like stressed these people out and like get them to go outside of ethical bounds, but he got it done. And you can question the methods, but he got it. Presentation came through.
Now we're going into the whiplash.
The TED Talk of the chicken example. Do you know the chicken example? This is off topic. I am sorry, but I will say it. So, short run. There was this guy. I had an experiment of groups of chickens. One group of chickens was like, and he measured the productivity by counting how many eggs they laid. And he took one group of chickens and just had them go. And then he had another group of chickens that were super chickens. So he picked the most productive of the egg-laying chickens. And then he watched these two groups of chickens grow for 6 generations. And guess what? The overproductive super chickens, only like 3 of them lived because they all killed each other because they worked too hard. The other group of chickens, more productive.
Maybe they should have just had one overproductive chicken that was like taking care of all the other ones.
Well, I think, thematically, I mean, and I agree with you. Because here's the thing. I didn't know he wasn't like an engineer. I didn't know he wasn't like necessarily a quote-unquote tech guy.
It's not that he has no knowledge, right?
No.
It's just that he wasn't.
Knowledge.
He had the vision.
He had a vision.
And he knows what he's talking about. He's not Scully. Scully comes in with Pepsi or whatever marketing experience.
Managerial.
Like, he has been in this tech field he knows it. It's just Waz was the circuit board genius.
Right.
Like, he could.
He built his career out of hiring people that were smarter than him in other fields, yet he took all the credit for being the smartest man in the room.
Yeah, I mean,
for doing that.
For me, for me, I actually liken it to at least my view on directing film. Because the way that I look at directing, and this is like goes to my own when I direct shorts and when I do my own work, the director doesn't do anything. The director doesn't shoot the movie. The director doesn't act. The director doesn't write. The director doesn't compose the score.
Director can write.
Yes, but I'm saying like the job of a director, and in this case, Danny Boyle, like he may have those other talents, but that wasn't his job as director.
Right.
But the director's job is to get the composer to do the best score and the most appropriate score that it can be in line with what the writer's doing, and have the writer reflect what the actors need to give the best performances, and vice versa. It's the same thing that Steve Jobs is talking about in this movie.
The director is the conductor.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like Steve Jobs.
Lovely theme.
Playing the orchestra.
I really liked it, and I liked how they portrayed it and like literally put them in an orchestra pit.
So, we can start wrapping up. I don't see any other comments, and see if people had any other questions or comments about the movie and or this. So I'm just going to throw it back out for final thoughts about Steve Jobs. We'll start it off. I'm going to start it the way I'm going to end it the way I started it. Ladies first.
I can just say that this is a very well-made movie. It is something that I think that no matter if you're involved in film, you can reference it, look at it for artistic inspiration. And if you're not, and you just want to see an interesting story, I think it's done in a beautiful way that's easy to follow, and the story is engaging. Don't look to find a best friend out of it, because Steve Jobs will not be that person. But see it if you haven't, and recommend it because it seems to need the word of mouth.
Yeah. I very much enjoyed this film. I like technology, and watching this film makes me respect where everything, just like the ideas that people had behind technology and how it affected the world. And I just a big fan of Sorkin, so of course I enjoyed this film. Definitely going to rewatch it again. Yeah. Because it does have a rewatchability factor, and it's not that long of a film. It's so fast paced, you can easily just get into the rhythm of this film, and it kept my attention the whole time. And I'm excited to, see what other things that Aaron Sorkin has. And this does speak to our generation right now, so I think it's very relevant.
Yeah. Short and sweet for me. I try not to sound as super pretentious when I talk about films, but this is a good piece of cinema.
Yeah.
And bottom line, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. It's a good. It's a good movie-going experience. It's a really good story. It's told very smartly. Again, I think one of the strengths, I said this a little bit earlier, is that this could have been a complete work of fiction. It could have been called Launch, and it could have been about this guy who believes he's the smartest guy in the room and in the world, and he's selling goods that, you know, people don't yet know they want to buy, that they have to have. And you could have built this around this guy who's not an easy guy to work with, and you could have just made this movie, and it would have been a good movie still. This happens to be based on someone who's really, you know, who's a real person in life. It didn't, where it messed with facts and times and putting conversation in, it didn't mess with it so much that I felt it didn't ring true.
It was the essence.
Yeah, the essence was there. I got a great sense of this guy and the people around him. I thought there were really good performances. I think it nominatable, you know, from a writing standpoint, from acting, perhaps even picture and direction. I think it's that good of a movie. People should go out and go see this movie because you'll come out going, wow, that was a good movie. That was a really good movie. And hey, you know, there are other movies out there outside of The Martian, and this is a good adult drama told very well. So that's it. So, well, let's get into how people can support us on various social media. Zach, we'll start off with you. How can people support you, whether on Twitter or Facebook?
Well, you can support me, but you can also just keep up with me on Twitter and Instagram at @ZachWilson, ThatZachWilson, and on our sister network, AfterBuzz TV, talking about all kinds of nerdy television. We've got Grimm coming back this week, Doctor Who, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and a whole bunch more. Follow me along to check those out.
You can follow me on Twitter at Serafini TV.
At Sara_Stretton. I'm also on
The
Popcorn
underscore
Talk.
is important.
Yeah,
Get
because
that,
the
yes.
other one is the main.
Right.
But yeah, I do box office breakdown on the Popcorn Talk Network, and I'll be back at AfterBuzz in a couple months. My shows tend to be in the spring, so we will see.
So, and you can follow me or support me at DMovies1701. I want to thank you guys. This was a great show. Thank you, Zach, Marisa, Sarah, and thank you, the audience, whether you listened, whether you tuned in and watched this video live. Thank you very much. Continue to support us. Continue to watch and listen because we've got so many movies coming up. You know, we got Spectre, we've got Peanuts, we've got Mockingjay, and then this little independent film called Star Wars that'll be coming
See
out.
them, and then you can talk to us about
Yeah,
it.
and you can talk to us about it. But I think there's lots of want to see movies coming out in the very, very near future. Thanks again for watching. It's really important that you support us, comment, be part of the discussion, folks. So long.
Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.